It's still fresh and stale. There's a certain aspect about the news and about life and this kind of analyzation. And it has to do with anybody, not just us here doing it, but throughout history, when someone is trying to make, apparently, some out of the ordinary point, they will begin, of course, to speak in what seems to be similes and metaphors and symbolism and etc. And they even turn them into fables and myths. And they apply what apparently is the instruction inherent therein, or the attempted instruction. They will apply it. They will lay it upon poor animals. They'll lay it upon gods. They'll lay it upon spirits. They'll lay it upon inanimate objects. They'll lay it upon nature. But there is a certain aspect that probably no one's ever considered out loud, which means intellectually enough that they could even look at it. The best examples to try and talk about anything out of the ordinary, the best examples come from life. If you'd like to, I'll pretend to arrange my clothes and you can think about that, such as, is that true? If it is true, what's the alternative? How could it not be true, as opposed to what? But that's not it yet. That's not the end. The best examples come from life. There is a kind of, quote, as opposed to, such as religion attempts to do a lot, or mythology, if you consider mythology an attempt at a teaching mechanism, is that they apparently will talk about, and even history, but all amounts of fables and metaphysics, fairy tales, it's always somewhere removed from right here, right now. And even from many ordinary views, the more uncontemporaneous, if there is such a, there is, the increasingly otherworldly it is, then apparently, by many people's views, the more it must be fraught, if not downright pregnant, with meaning. That is, you can talk about all sorts of just astounding ideas and possibilities and not get arrested and thrown out in most circumstances if you make it sound as though you're talking about the gods, or if you say it has something to do with spirituality or religion, the gods in general. You can say almost anything. You can talk about that. You can start expressing opinions that man should be like so-and-so, that he should operate in such a manner, he should behave in such a manner, he should think a certain way that he doesn't think. And if you do it on the basis that the gods told us to, or at one time the gods had us doing that, and then we ran amok. Sort of science fiction, I guess, as it would be called today. But as long as you get away from immediate, everyday life, apparently you can get by with more. Just look at it that way, and it's a fact. But, I repeat, the best examples are from life. Those of you that can think good, you do know that even people who start saying, well, here, let me quote from this holy scripture that we found here in a cave, and it says right here that one time the gods told man, do so-and-so. And those of you who can think, you do know that that still comes from life. They can say it's a message that was left here in an old coffee can by a flying saucer with my name on it, and they're from an absolute other galaxy. But you know it's actually an example from life, whatever the hell it is, whatever the supposed message. But what I want you to specifically say, that to attribute it, to go ahead and say, just to drag it point blank from life, which is part of the purpose of us carrying on this news program, and reading this news and then having it analyzed. But it would be, to some minds, from a certain view, if you know how to do it, it is an added benefit, a more usable aspect of trying to impart some out of the way, out of the routine information, to specifically just use everyday life, the news. Just what's going on. people do, I don't mean it's absolutely unknown. People do attempt to do it. Ministers, psychiatrists, all sorts of people, they'll say, well, so-and-so happened today. They usually make themselves a part of it. A parishioner came in and said, Father, let me tell you what happened to me. My wife ran off and did so-and-so. And then he'll say, and of course that relates exactly to Jeremiah 4:17 or... So, but you notice they cannot stay just on now. They cannot stay on some event in life. And they can't really do it unless they personalize it, unless they make themselves a part of it. Back to where the serious part of this was. The best examples, the ones that are most meaningful to anybody, whether you heard it from somebody else, whether it seemed that somebody was telling you this, or whether you did it yourself, the best examples are in life. And by saying in life, I mean contemporaneous. What appears to be something going on now. A hot item. But there is a beauty. As always, there is a balance. There is a self-protection built in. There is a kind of fuse. There is a kind of tightrope of which I assume the Gillette and Schick corporations would be proud had they had a hand in stretching it out. It's the sorts of things that even the Wallendas, even those most calloused of foot, would have to go, ooh, ah, ooh. Some allegories work better than others. And then some do not work at all. If I had a circus crowd here, they would appreciate that. The best examples in life are in life, and the best examples would be whatever is hot, a hot topic going on. There is a built-in safety mechanism wherein, though, if somebody knew what they were doing in a way, somebody was trying to tell you, try to impart, trying to get you to look at things in a certain unroutine manner, here's the justice of it. Follow this kind of, I'm sure you'll forgive me, reasoning. The hotter the example, the better the example. The hotter the example, the more immediate danger there is that people will choke on it. There's no end to what I could bring up, and if there's enough of you people, without me giving a caveat, there are enough people that I could talk about almost anything with most of you, and you could refrain from strangling on it. You might not even have much trouble even dealing with it. But let's assume that this was in some way that we're open up the studio and people came in just off the street, just at random, and listening to the news. And we started reporting items, and I started making comment on such things. A great one right now is abortion. That would be just an almost endless supply like anything else, stock car racing, politics. But abortion would be a great one because it is hot. It is hot in life, in our part of the world at least. It is hot right now, 1993, the United States, most of the Western world, it is hot, hot, hot. People out on the streets, on opposite sides of the streets, waving their fists. People with suits and ties and high school educations, cursing, getting on their hands and knees and crawling around or doing God knows what all. Waving signs having to do with God, spirits. Other sides waving the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And other people waving objects that I don't even want to think about. But, and it is a great, if you don't see, for one thing, it is a prime example right now of the kind of combined dance, combined effect, and with every good dance there is the tango and the patchy element of the dancers periodically being at one another's throat, the combined forces is a great example between hormones and neurons. That is, between the more physical, silent part of a man's being, and of course a woman's, and the neurons, us using it symbolically as the thought processes, the hormones of the brain. It is a great example, the whole idea of abortion, because hormones got no idea about abortion. Of course, you guys know that hormones don't talk, and so you can't say they got much of an idea of anything. But if they could, hormones would not have any problem with abortion because they'd never think about it. Hormones don't decide. Hormones do not sit around in your blood system, man or woman, and think, do I want to get pregnant? There is no alternative. They might not. The person might not, but then you'd have to really begin to wrangle with ordinary medical common knowledge, which I'll go ahead and point out to you, that in that sense, people get pregnant that want to get pregnant, and et cetera. At that level. I know it's not true in the civilized talking world because people say, well, it's not true. I didn't want to be pregnant. And if a person says that, they're telling you the truth, except who's telling you that? Neurons, not hormones, because hormones don't even think about it. So it's only neurons. It's only neurons that can say, I don't want to have children. Hormones can't say that. It's only neurons can say, well, I'm pregnant and I don't want to be pregnant. That means nothing to the hormones. It would be a great example amongst many others. But you notice we never report items on abortions, and I never brought it up. Why? It is a great, hot example, but if we had ordinary people, if this was an ordinary news show with ordinary analysis, it is too hot. And it's no big deal to explain. It's just simply that people's mind, just a cross-section of ordinary, civilized, everyday people, I guess an ordinary civilized description would be they can hear certain words and they are so hot that it begins to run up on their own mental screen, their own personal agenda immediately. The pro and con. Their decision about what you meant, and if you tried to say, I'm going to use as an example race relations. I'm going to use as an example the conflicts between the major religions. Or, let's see, I'll use abortion. But, let me tell you people, I've got no opinion, I've got no interest in argument. Ordinary people, besides their own, the word very likely being so hot that if they were trying to follow what was going on in some nonpartisan way, most people, as soon as they heard abortion, would be like that. Their own agenda, plus you absolutely could not sell them, not just on this, but on any area. You cannot sell somebody on the idea that you've got no agenda about a subject, that you've got no pro or con, because if they do, you can't tell them you don't. It's beyond me saying they won't believe it. They can't believe it. Their only alternative would be, well, you're insane. Well, some people would be, well, you're evil. You're just intrinsically evil, which is, I guess it's a toss-up whether you want to be evil or insane. Like one of those news items, your choice to be dumb or serious. And that was in, remember, the bad place. We don't want to think about. There's a point to all this, albeit subtle. And it's got nothing to do with abortion, because I could pick out of it. I threw in, I assume you were listening, I threw in race relations. That's kind of hot now. Fraud in government. Waste in government spending. Jesus. You know as many as I do, things that just would almost grab an ordinary person and go, ooh. But just abortion seems, because it seems, they can make it out, it's a matter literally of life or death. Killing people, it's ungodly. And other people saying, hey, it's nobody's business. It would be a great, great subject. It entails many things. But you do understand that it is so good, what I'm trying to get you to see, I was using the term hot to say good. It would be so useful. I still like hot. Well, there's somebody that laughs, so maybe you. It is so hot that it's too hot. There is the justice in a person ever trying to think, not just somebody trying to hear what I'm talking about, but in trying to think for yourself, because the very examples, and it's also back for those of you who are still pondering whether you grew up in the belly of a mother who was frightened by P.T. Barnum and therefore couldn't get the grasp of that thin tightrope erected by the Gillette brothers. That is, it is such a hot example that trying to walk on it is too hot. Trying to use it with ordinary people, it's too hot. One more time. Getting past the point of me saying, well, I don't do it and we can't talk about it, in your own thinking. When your own mind is running along, surveying, and let us say that you're making some effort on your own not to be just a run-of-the-mill, routine, trailways riding dunderhead. You're trying to think and subjects come up. And you've already got great pros and cons. You've already got passionate agendas that have already been instilled in you thanks to the evil, nefarious conspiracy of, let's all say it together, being alive. So they're already there. And there you are thinking along, thinking to yourself perhaps, I'm getting better. I am getting more broad-minded. I get less upset. Of course, not taking into account that you're now 40 instead of 20. Oh, no, I'll go along with it. And you could be thinking, yes, I am getting much better. And you're perhaps having a cup of coffee and looking out the window and thinking, is that my good side? When I get famous, will they put me on a stamp? And maybe you go on the radio and suddenly say something about 1,400 arrests made outside 2 abortion clinics in Topeka. And suddenly your mind is as though there is indeed a long rubber band of some kind in your mind. And of course you could explain it if you're ordinary, you're supposed to. And if somebody could jump, some smart aleck news analyst could jump into your brain, into your life and say, you were just trying to think in some kind of non-partisan, non-routine way, and now look, something as old as this has suddenly got you just in a froth. Your brain is back on a single track. You might as well be drunk. You might as well be on drugs. Of course, this is one of the news items pointed out. There are dulling narcotics that you do not have to go out and buy. Life's not all as cheap as some people think. Life's not a total money grubber. So you get into an area, and in your case it could be, in anybody's individual case, it could be a matter of your particular religion. It could be the matter of your culture. And you're there thinking great thoughts, having magnanimous, impartial thoughts about, let us say, the Hindus wrestling with the Muslims in India. And you can be in a kind of superior, in the privacy of your own kitchen, kind of superior, moral, and intellectual, a special position about tut-tut. Hindus fighting Muslims over religion, when, let us say to your view, they both might as well be wearing big old T-shirts that say, I am an atheist. That's not religion. And now you are thinking and realizing, what a broad, piercing, universal type mind you're getting. And still in the news, it says something about half of the protesters at the abortion clinic turned out to be from the Southern Baptist Church. And suddenly, your mind has been snapped to the radio, snapped to whatever the pros and cons of some particular area. And there it is. You understand that you're, or than me, you just leave it. I was making fun of somebody having the foresight to be impartial about a battle over which they've got no interest, between the Hindus and the Muslims, between who's going to win the Stanley Cup this year, and the U hockey. It's a bunch of brain-dead people that could afford to get a pair of skates. You can be magnanimous until suddenly they say something about stock car racing, that they find out that the IQ of most people that go to stock car racing is below 3 digits. And you, of course, having your autographed picture of Richard Petty in your pocket, you think, wait a minute, because the news went from your news was just sort of making light of hockey fans. So to you, the news was kind of impartial. It was a correct view of sports. But suddenly your brain went from impartial analyzation to needless gossip. That suddenly your brain hears somebody talking about stock car racing fans, and you go, wait a minute, funny's funny. That's not funny. There it is. In your case, the case I'm making up, a hot, great example. And what is it? The initials are known in the trade as TFH. Too friggin' hot. There's the example. If you could see a little bit, to take up for them, in a metaphorical sense, of course, is what religion is faced with. Not that the people know what they're doing, but in any area, philosophy at one time, or the arts, but in areas that apparently institutionally, or a group, collectively, it doesn't have to have a seriously recognizable name, but there's a group of people that sort of ad hoc institutionally are trying to promote some idea. And what they're left with, back to religion, I don't want to use a good example so I don't make it too obscure. If they knew what they were doing, if we had people involved with religion day by day, and they were actually trying to encourage people to think for themselves, to think outside the normal boundaries, here's what they're confronted with. It's just what I'm talking about. They're confronted with the fact of trying to lay out examples that are hot. But if they get hot enough to do anything, if they get hot enough to ignite somebody's mind, they're too hot for an ordinary person. It has always, at least anybody I was saying abortion or whatever, conflicts between Hindus and Muslims in India circa 1993, none of this is new. This is as old as hormones. There is no new source for this kind of heat, for these hot spots. The only thing that changes, apparently, is the flash point. And it just comes and goes. It just seems that, abortion is real hot now. But if you start picking out religious conflicts, it's just the flashpoint change. We could say, well, it's the Hindus and the Muslims right now. And we could also say, well, it's the Christians and the Muslims in parts of Lebanon, and it's the Jews and the Muslims in Lebanon, and it's the Protestants and the Catholics in Northern Ireland. And all you got to do is just, make blanks there, move back, and pick out any time you want to. 1640, 1537, 1211, 1112, 1009. See, we got here too late, Martha. We get to see him sign the damn thing. That's the punchline to a joke. It has to do with some people visiting the Tower of London and the signing of the Magna Carta and what time it was, and his wife overslept or some stuff. At any rate, the source of the heat of what I was calling hot spots, of examples that would seem to be really touchy, inflammatory subjects, areas of human existence, behavior, thought, philosophy, at any given time, whether it be now, 20 BC. The source is the same. The source of all these hot examples is the same. The flashpoint, that is the dress, changes. The 50-year-old mannequin, that is the uncertainty, that is the conflict, and it changes names, it changes dress. And once you even see that, then you see, in a sense, the even greater uselessness, or folly, but uselessness of whatever the conflict is. That, wait a minute, I know humans have had perhaps disputes in the past that were of less than monumental or eternal consequence, such as them arguing, the pagans, back in Roman times, should they have ever let the Christians ever get a toehold there in Rome? Now, forget that. But we're talking about something serious now. We're talking about abortion, damn it. That's new, all right. Certainly is. It just came up. Roe v. Wade, whenever that was, the Supreme Court decision, just the last 25 or 30 years. That's right. It just become a real flashpoint. Do you mean women just started getting pregnant 25, 30 years ago? Well, perhaps not exactly. But you mean it was only 25 or 30 years ago that a woman, plus we'll assume some man with some relationship to the whole situation, that one or both of them went, I'm pregnant, she's pregnant, and we don't like it. So that only started post Roe v. Wade, right? There was an interesting news story, I don't think it was reported, about, there was a little town, I think it was in Oklahoma, that had a strange, I guess it came out through the last census. Just one of these little statistical things. I don't think it ever... Anyway, it was this little town, and what was strange is it's been incorporated for something like 120 years, and the population has never changed. The way they put it was like every time, this population, whatever it is, 205 or whatever, I don't know. But the point was that there have births and everything going on, but the funny thing seems to be is that every time a woman gets pregnant, some man leaves town. And it just... It's just the population being consistent. They've never had to change that little sign up, that says, "Welcome to Anywhere, Oklahoma, population 205. It's been that way. I don't know. I know most of us didn't major in statistics, so I'm not sure what it all means. The practical aspect, besides it is true, not that you and I are the supreme importance or any importance, but we are an example of me pointing out is to do something. If you were dealing with an ordinary audience, you would have to be running, as you should anyway, but you would literally, specifically have to be running always a few seconds ahead of everything you're going to say to do a kind of editing job. If you just had an ordinary audience and they all believed that you said, we're going to attempt to talk about the life of man, the news of man, in a way that's not ordinary, a way that's not necessarily insane, but it is not partisan. It is not limited to the regular pro and con, the regular gravity of neural thought as it's ordinarily thought. And if people say, all right, I like that, I like the idea, and they listen, you would still, and let's assume that they were giving it their best shot, maybe getting a little out of it. Not necessarily, understand, learning something from whoever is doing the talking, you or me, but they were, beginning to have some feel in their brain, which a real thinker's brain does feel, regardless of what you may have read from neuroscience. And they're really starting to have an enjoyment in their minds almost working, getting close to working in a way that is not predictable to them, that is not limited to the regular agenda of pro and con. And if you didn't watch it, though, and have some feel of what was going on, just in general, you'd suddenly say abortion. You'd suddenly say Jewish, Catholic, Chinese, communist. And you've got to know this. And if you could see good, which you should be, or you shouldn't be talking, you'll see people's minds suddenly. The best effort they were doing, that their mind was doing something, dancing almost to a new dance for a few seconds. And all you got to do is just hit one of those hot spots, and they're gone. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way life works. That is the way life, intellectually, on a collective level, staggers. And it gets somewhere. One more time. You understand that you would be faced with that. Not just me, but if you were trying to do that and talk to noise, you would have to watch it. I mean, good. Pardon the English, but you'd have to watch it good. Constantly. And here's what it is, though. If you understood anything, you would know what the best examples are the hottest, and what I would really like to do, are they listening? Could they stand it? And suddenly you say, well, I was going to use an example, the NBA. But I'll tell you a better metaphorical example is abortion. Back to you. Back to the operations of one man's, the high end of his nervous system where it talks. Look at what it does to you. Back to my little made-up scene of you sitting there thinking how foolish it is. You being able to non-partisanly hear the news regarding the latest skirmishes between the Hindus and the Muslims. And you being able, in a sense, to have a broader view, to be that kind of insightful cow contemplating the open prairie, regardless of what that cow said to his chum in the news story. But you're sitting like that until the news, and they say, and now we switch over to the latest news from Jordan, where King Hussein says so-and-so, and suddenly they're talking about your religion. And it's no longer, open range. It's no longer, methinketh I might be able to think. It's now methinketh I'll take sides. As you're supposed to. But notice how the justice, how the protection is built into you. the ultimate importance of what the example I was trying to use, it would not be you trying to instruct other people. It's in your own brain. You try to think, or you believe that you're trying to think. And what happens? You're constantly tripped up by what? Seems to be my own thinking. But if you're ordinary and you skate around that area, it's not just your own thinking, it's, well, I'm tripped up by certain historical, genetic, cultural ties. There was a news item that pointed out, it was in the base of a query, it was related to this. It said, what could be more dangerous to the peace and tranquility and order of a community than a madman loose? I'll tell you what would be worse. Would be if you had institutions such as religion, any kind of institution, get loose from its moorings and actually begin to take its charge, its aim, seriously. We're talking about serious danger then, because then it would no longer be staggering to make progress. It'd be like the Queen Mary had turned loose inside of a little, fish pond. It broke loose, and it came in there that religion, science, anything, your own thoughts, that yes, I think I have a mind and I'm in charge. It should be thinking. I think I'll actually try to think. You would have said, if we had everything being equal, and you didn't know what you were doing, and you could still do it, you would have turned loose, you would have broken this huge, unwieldy ocean liner, this institution. And you are your own institution. That's what collective intelligence, that's what ordinary sanity is, the institution of your community. That's how you know that you're sane. You're in the same rhythm with the community. But it would be like this gigantic vessel that had broken loose from the moorings, and God knows what would happen. Of course, what in the Newsline point out would happen, it would begin to take its charge, its articles of incorporation, its stated aim. It'd suddenly start to take them seriously and try to do it. Better yet, you live next door to a serial killer. You wouldn't want to be there. Bye.